We start today with the latest on Afghanistan. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley's covering Afghans trying to escape Kabul, while NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece is on the North Lawn. Shannon, first to you. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan briefing the press this afternoon on the situation in Afghanistan. Sullivan saying the administration had to make a hard call and take responsibility for the chaotic withdrawal. How else are they handling the criticism of what we're seeing in Kabul right now?
Well, they continue to defend the president's decision to withdraw these troops. As far as how that process played out, they acknowledge that this took place quicker than they expected. They said that this unfolded quicker than almost everybody, they argue, expected. And as a result, there have been some messy, chaotic moments, but that they are working as quickly as they can to address those. Here's a little bit more of what we heard from Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
We did assess early on, when the president asked for a clear-eyed assessment, that there would be impacts and there would be consequences of making the choice he made. He also acknowledged yesterday, and I would just reiterate, that this did happen more rapidly than we anticipated. I would also note and reiterate to anyone who's a critic that any president has to make difficult choices as commander-in-chief, as Jake Sullivan just said. And the president made the choice that he was not going to ask U.S. men and women, servicemen and women, to fight a war that the Afghans were not willing to fight for themselves.
So another day on the defense here at the White House. It is unlikely, or at least unclear, whether or not this defense will help blunt any of this criticism, which continues to come in, and not just from Republicans, but from members of the president's own party, including former Obama administration officials.
Yeah, it's really coming across the board today. Shannon, the Pentagon saying today that thousands of Americans are still in Afghanistan. What are they doing to get them out?
Well, Psaki told us that there are about 11,000 Americans still in the country. The Pentagon, in a briefing today, said the airport, though, is now open. They hope to have flights going out every hour to the point where they can get about 9,000 people out a day. Here's a little bit more from the Pentagon today.
Our commanders at the airport are in communication with Taliban commanders on the ground outside the airport. There have been discussions. There is communication between them and us. And I would just let the results speak for themselves. There hasn't been any hostile interactions by the Taliban to our people or to our operations. Part of our operations include helping evacuate American citizens, and that process continues.
And the White House is hoping that with the airport open and Americans getting out of the country now, they can put some of those chaotic scenes from yesterday and the past 72 hours behind them now.
All right, Shannon Pettypiece of the White House, thank you so much. The Taliban saying today nobody will be harmed in Afghanistan, but thousands of people are still desperately trying to escape the country. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley has more from London.
Yeah, Allison, well, no surprises from the Taliban today. Actually, they reiterated kind of what they had been saying before. They won't be taking revenge. They won't be attacking women. They won't be attacking minority groups. They'll be keeping the peace. They're desperate to try to show the world that they're a different brand of Taliban than they used to be. Now, I spoke with a bunch of people in Kabul currently, a lot of young people. And actually, some of them, especially the young people, one of them said to me that this is his first Taliban. So for them, this is new. They don't know the Taliban from 20 years ago, and they're suspicious. They've heard their stories from their parents, their relatives, their friends and family, and of course, they don't trust the Taliban. But given how dire the circumstances are, they're willing to try to suspend their distrust, at least for the moment, and try to take the opportunity to see if the Taliban will behave differently than they were told they behaved more than 20 years ago. Now, it's a critical situation, especially for those who worked for the U.S. government, and especially for women. And I spoke with one young woman. She was facing multiple threats, not real threats. She hasn't been actually personally threatened, but she's very scared. She is trying to leave the country. And it's not just because she's a young woman who's well-educated and speaks English. It's also because she's a musician. And the Taliban is very strict about musicians and music. They don't allow it. They've attacked musicians in the past. They've even killed them. And now she's worried she's going to try to hide her instruments and her sheet music if the Taliban knock at her door. Here's what she had to say.
I think that the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from Afghanistan could have been planned better. And if it was planned better, then this mess would not have happened in the first place. I don't know if they're going to start searching like civilians' houses, because that way I'll be really scared. I'll have to like hide pretty much everything that I have, because I think, considering the people that they were back to 20 years ago, I think I'll be in trouble if they find my documents or my musical instruments or stuff like that.
So you saw in that clip, we haven't given her name, we've obscured her face, and that's because she's worried about her safety, and we're worried about her safety too. But you know, she also reacted to that interview last night, that press conference last night that Joe Biden gave, in which he blamed the Afghan government, for the most part, for what's been going on, for these images, these really horrible images that have been coming out of Afghanistan over the last couple of days. She said that actually that was very offensive, that a lot of people were disappointed that Biden blamed the Afghan people and the government, but she said that some of her friends also agreed. They understand. They've seen the corruption in the Afghan government in Kabul over the last 2 decades, and they understand why the Americans have left Afghanistan. She said there was never an expectation that the Americans would stay forever, but she said, as so many Afghans have been saying, not in this way. She was hoping that it would be more organized, that there would be more relief, more assurances given to those, especially those who cooperated with the U.S. government and U.S. soldiers. But now she says she's angry. She's angry at Biden, and she's angry at the U.S. government. She's angry at the Afghan people. And of course, she's very uncertain and very frightened for her own future.
Catastrophic and heartbreaking. Former CIA Director General David Petraeus describing the fall of Afghanistan. He spoke with NBC nightly news anchor Lester Holt about the U.S. withdrawal and our moral obligation to the Afghan people.
Certainly the outcome, I think, is catastrophic. It's also heartbreaking. It's tragic. And I do think there were alternative approaches, options that we, in fact, should have considered. But we are where we are now. And I think what's most important at this moment in time is to realize that there are many that we have so far left behind. And we must do everything we can with all the resources available to us to ensure that we meet the moral obligation to them.
Was there any version of the story that did not end with the Taliban back in charge?
Certainly there was. There was a sustained commitment that could have been pursued. I think that it was really the psychological effect of our announcement of the withdrawal, then the actual withdrawal, and then very significantly the withdrawal of the contractors that kept the U.S. provided helicopters and planes in the air and showed the Afghan soldiers on the ground that there would be someone coming to the rescue. And if soldiers on the ground don't think that that is coming, then they're going to do what we have seen Afghan soldiers do in the past week. And by the way, Afghan soldiers fought and died in huge numbers over the course of the past 2 decades. So the idea that they wouldn't fight for their country is something that I think is just not accurate.
What would you say to American soldiers and their families who risked their lives, who sacrificed their lives, who came back wounded from this war? What would you tell them right now as they watch all this play out?
That they should be quietly proud that when our country needed them in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, that they volunteered to step forward and serve our country at a time of war. I feel enormously privileged to have done that as well, and indeed to have led them in Afghanistan as well as in Iraq.
Are we facing the same Taliban that was running the country up until the U.S. invasion, or have they evolved into something different?
I think they have evolved in the sense that they are more conscious of their public relations campaign. But I think the actions on the ground seem to indicate that they are the same old Taliban, that they're an ultra-conservative, medieval, theocratic organization that seeks to establish an Islamist emirate. I am fairly confident al-Qaeda and the Islamic State will be able to reestablish sanctuaries, but we will, without question, keep an eye on that, disrupt it, degrade it, and ideally destroy it when that happens. But that's going to be vastly more difficult given the distance from which we'll have to operate.
So you see a military role in Afghanistan, but really more from looking at for our own strategic interests rather than stabilization.
I don't see how we would get involved in stabilization of a country run by the Taliban, Lester. I wonder whether we'll even reestablish an embassy anytime soon. So, no, I don't see a role other than to ensure that we can identify activities by al-Qaeda and also by the Islamic State affiliate in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region when they try to reestablish the kind of sanctuary that al-Qaeda had when they planned the 9/11 attacks in Afghanistan under Taliban control.
2 decades, $2 trillion, nearly 200,000 lives. The toll of the war in Afghanistan coming into focus as President Biden defends pulling U.S. troops out of the country. The historic decision, just the latest chapter in Biden's steadily dwindling support for the conflict.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended.
If it requires the use of ground forces, I have no doubt you'll get support to do it. I'm not confirming this. Let's assume it turns out to be bin Laden and his organization. Any cell, any group, anything it takes, including using ground forces. This isn't going to be 800 or 500 or 200,000 troops storming someplace. We have to be patient, we have to be resolved, and we have to understand that this is going to be something that can be done if, in fact, we do it in conjunction with the rest of the world.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
The President has personally stated it to Senator Helms and to me, and I'm sure to others, that we have to be in this for the long haul. We can't, quote, drain the swamp and let it fill up again.
Senator Biden, among the chairman.
In Kabul today, Afghan leader Hamid Karzai had a blunt message for visiting U.S. Senator Joe Biden.
Like a lot of your money to come to Afghanistan.
I think this government is really going along on actually nickels and dimes now. It needs some help immediately. The first real test of post-9/11 engagement is whether or not we're going to stay the course in Afghanistan. If Chairman Karzai is to govern effectively, the first thing he needs is security. The second is a plan, which is underway, to rebuild a military and a police force and an infusion of economic assistance just to do the basic things, like put in fax machines, telephones, desk, paper, the things that are the necessary tools of governance in the most basic of ways. History is going to judge us very harshly, I believe, if we allow the hope of a liberated Afghanistan to evaporate because we are fearful of the phrase nation building or we do not stay the course.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
I'm surprised we still have quite a great deal of the press. I thought you had all gone to Iraq. Still here. Good.
On Afghanistan, I'm very pleased the administration has agreed to expand the international security force, but progress, I think, has been awfully slow.
Democrats charge the U.S. is creating more terrorists because of Iraq.
It's not a surprise at all that we have been significantly limited in our ability to deal with worldwide terror because we are tied down, bogged down in Iraq.
Earlier, Biden made a surprise visit to a dangerous Taliban stronghold in Afghanistan, where he promised U.S. support for its struggle against terrorism, drugs, and corruption.
After my trip, President Obama ordered a comprehensive review of the policy toward Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we want to make sure that our goals are clear and achievable, because I would respectfully suggest none of you nor us could say precisely what our goal is.
But the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
We've decimated al-Qaeda Central. We have eliminated Osama bin Laden. That was our purpose. But we are leaving in 2014. Period.
Today marked a turning point in Afghanistan as the U.S.-led coalition formally ended its combat role in that country. But although that mission has officially come to an end, the conflict in Afghanistan is far from over.
In 2014, NATO issued a declaration affirming that Afghan security forces would from that point on have full responsibility for this country's security by the end of that year. That was 7 years ago. So when will it be the right moment to leave?
war in Afghanistan was never meant to be a multi-generational undertaking.
They were definitely firing at us. There's no question. And clearly everybody in the town, which is basically a town that was controlled by the Northern Alliance, they have the largest presence there. Every other person is walking around with a machine gun. They knew we were there. They knew where we were staying.
Just weeks after 9/11, NBC News' Kerry Sanders was sent to cover the war in Afghanistan. He got up close and personal with the Afghan people, giving us a rare look inside their lives while telling some of their unique stories. Today, Kerry is sharing his perspective on Afghanistan then versus now. Kerry, thank you so much for being here today. That was just incredible footage, seeing you on the video phone. This week, you tweeted that the children you met October 2001 in Afghanistan are now adults. The future they were living will disappear with Taliban rule. The girls, now women, will live lives they believed would never return, lives their mothers told them they would not experience. Hashtag not what was promised. Kerry, tell us more about these incredible Afghan women you have met, how their lives have changed over the last 20 years, and what they fear will happen now that the Taliban has taken over.
When the war began, women in Afghanistan had to wear a burqa. I think we've all seen that, where it's covered head to toe. But over the years, there was a liberation. Women could take the burqa off. They could actually go to a beauty parlor. I met women, in fact, one woman who was at the earliest stages of all of this, marked for death. She had to escape the country with her daughter, her son, and her husband, because she was simply teaching other women about feminine hygiene, something that is just expected to be taught in the world we live in, where there she was marked for death for sharing this information. And so I spoke to her. She's now in Canada. She made her way out of the country. It was quite a circuitous route. I talked to her as all of this is unfolding. We talked really for some time last night, and she told me that her greatest fear is not only that these girls who are now women who have experienced this freedom, they understand what that freedom is, that now the Taliban may well take away from them. But she also told me that she feels for the young girls, the girls who will hit puberty and such right after, and will be assigned husbands by people that they don't even know. That traditionally in that part of the world, prior to the U.S. incursion in Afghanistan and all of this war, a young girl, 14, 15, 16 years old, could be assigned to somebody 20 to 30 years older than them and say, you are now this man's wife. And the fear she has is for all of those children now who will find that the world that they thought had disappeared is back, Allison.
Oh, what a terrifying thing for those young women. Kerry, you're outside Central Command in Tampa. I know you spoke with an Afghan who fled the country, who was fearing for his life because he had helped the U.S. forces. What did he tell you? What's he saying about his experience?
Well, he is just so anxious. Of course, Central Command is here. He was working as a defense contractor, as sort of a loose term, in Afghanistan, where he was helping the U.S. liaison with the national forces there. He escaped because his life was in danger, but now left behind are his parents, his 16-year-old sister, a much younger sister, and his brother. And he is extremely concerned that there is paperwork. It doesn't matter how much we've seen burning of papers and things being destroyed, that there is paperwork, there is information that will tie him to having helped the U.S. and then tie it to his family, and that there will be retribution. And so he's incredibly anxious. And, you know, we're watching these images, Allison, of people trying to make their way to the airport in Kabul to get on these military transport flights to get out. But as we stand here at Central Command, it's a reminder of how big Afghanistan is. It's about the size of California plus another 61%. And so the area of Afghanistan I was in was way in the north. I mean, it actually shared a border with China. And so there are people there who also would like to get out. They can't make their way from a place like Kujabahuddin down to Kabul, even if the U.S. were there. And now with roadblocks and all of the delays, they know that they're stuck there. They are not going to get out, even though we see these incredible images coming from the airport. It's a much bigger country than just the capital city. Allison?
Yeah, Carrie, you bring up such a point because those images from the airport are so upsetting to see so many people trying to get out, and they just represent such a small fraction of the Afghan people. Carrie, thank you so much for your reporting and throwing it back to 20 years ago when you were there in Afghanistan. We really appreciate your insights. NBC News Digital reporter Maya Eaglin. She's got the latest headlines from NBCNews.com. Hey, Maya.
Hey, Allison. We start with a raging wildfire in Northern California. Mandatory evacuation orders are now underway after the CALDOR fire nearly tripled in size overnight. The fire now burning more than 6,500 acres in El Dorado County with zero containment. Officials say the challenging terrain is making the fire that much harder to fight. And Chris CUOMO finally breaking his silence. Last night on his show, the CNN anchor addressed the sexual misconduct report and resignation of his brother, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Chris claiming he never covered the story because it would violate network rules. He said he did urge his brother to resign when the time came, but added, "I'm an advisor, not a brother." Quote, "I'm not an advisor, I'm a brother." And Spirit Airlines reporting a massive loss. The airline saying the cancellation of more than 2,800 flights earlier this month cost them $50 million in lost revenue. The airline blamed the disruptions on bad weather, staffing shortages, and technical problems. Spirit is joining other airlines in reducing the number of daily flights amid a rise in ticket cancellations due to Delta variant concerns. And the message to parents from Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre. In a Today Show exclusive, Favre revealed a new PSA urging parents not to allow children under 14 to play tackle football. The NFL star saying it could reduce the risk of developing the progressive and fatal neurological condition commonly known as CTE. And we end with some shocking video out of Utah. Cell phone video shows an alligator attacking a trainer during a child's birthday party at an entertainment center in Salt Lake City. The trainer was able to wrestle with the animal when a brave bystander jumped into the enclosure and onto the alligator's back. The trainer then pulled to safety and is now recovering from arm injuries. Allison?
All right, Maya, thank you so much. An international rescue effort today in Haiti, the U.S. Coast Guard flying in to save the injured after this weekend's massive earthquake, the youngest survivor just a few months old. Tropical Depression Grace also drenching the region, complicating that search and rescue. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns has the latest on the storm. NBC News freelance journalist Ed Augustin is in Havana, Cuba, with the latest on Haiti. So, Ed, let's start with you. That storm hit Haiti with strong winds and heavy rain. What's the latest there today?
Over the years, Haiti has been heavily deforested by illegal logging practices and bad agricultural practices. And that means that, according to geologists, only about 1% of Haiti's primary forests that used to exist in the mountains exist there today. And that meant that, unfortunately, last night, when Tropical Storm Grace ravaged the island and lashed the mountains and the rest of the country with rain, a huge amount of that rain careered down the mountains into the ravines below because there's very little soil absorption because there's not many trees. And so we saw earlier today footage of some parts of Haiti that were up to waist height in water. And of course, that can only be a tragedy for people still trapped under the rubble. The Haitian state says that this morning the rescue effort geared up again, obviously in difficult circumstances. So far, a total of 16 people have been confirmed to have been saved, pulled out of the rubble 3 days on, with, unfortunately, I have to say, a great many corpses.
And what can you tell us about the U.S. Coast Guard's mission in Haiti, and what other kind of help the U.S. and other countries are providing at this point?
Earlier today, NBC's Gabe Gutierrez spoke to Austin Holmes from the NGO Mission of Hope, who's there on the ground assisting with the rescue effort right now.
You've got some urgent medical cases that need to get out, but we're really working to resource the hospitals. The medical staff here is doing excellent. They're significantly overrun and under-resourced right now. So med supplies and personnel support is critical.
So as well as the NGOs helping out on the ground, the United States sent a rescue team that touched down a couple of days ago of 65 people to help the search through the rubble for any survivors. In addition to that, Cuba had a mission of 253 doctors that were already on the ground prior to the earthquake. Cuba and Haiti have decades-long health collaboration agreements, and those doctors moved south the day of the earthquake towards the epicenter to help out with relief efforts on the ground. And today, the United Nations has announced it's allocated $8 million in aid to help out with the post-earthquake recovery. But it's worth pointing out, these I don't want to say gestures, these actions, of course, are symbolic, of course, saves lives, of course, are only welcome. But at the same time, let's not lose sight of it. These, according to UNICEF, 1.2 million people and over 500,000 children have been affected by the quake. So 65 people helping out here, 250 doctors. It's welcome, but it's not up to the scale that's needed to adequately deal with this. And that's one of the reasons why, when there's an earthquake like this, the media focuses on Haiti. The state doesn't have the capacity to deal with it, and it has to rely on the international community. And after something like an earthquake where infrastructure is broken, the ability to get to where things people are and give them what they need is severely limited. And that's why we're talking about a humanitarian crisis on this scale this time, as we were in 2010 after an even bigger quake.
Yeah, Ed Augustin reporting on Haiti for us. Thank you so very much. Tropical storm Grace strengthening as it threatens the Caribbean. And we're watching tropical depression Fred move through the south. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns has the latest on both.
Yes, this is the active time of our season. We're approaching that peak, which, by the way, is the first week of September. And we have 3 storms that we're watching out there. There's one at Henri that we're not too worried about. It's going to spin near Bermuda and not do anything. But the other one, Grace, has already been a huge issue in areas like Haiti. And then Fred, of course, we've been tracking through the southeast over the last 2 days. So let's get into the first storm that we're going to deal with. And this is Grace. We just learned that the tropical storm watch and warnings have been completely dropped for Haiti. So that's good news. As the storm pulls away, the rain is finally ending. If anything, it was mostly causing delays to the search and rescue of those areas that were so hard hit by the earthquake. So that was really that southern portion there, almost where the H and the A is there, written in the word Haiti. And that's where the heavy rain was all last night, finally improving. And then the next couple of days, it should be a lot better. So for the Coast Guard getting in there, the helicopter supplies or bringing patients out that need to go to hospitals, the weather conditions will be dramatically improved from the last 2 days. So where does this storm go from here? This storm actually is a pretty large storm. It's gotten a lot bigger in the last couple of days, and it does look like it's going to increase in intensity. Right now, almost directly over the top of Jamaica, 50-mile-per-hour winds. This is heading almost due west. And these storms are heading for, Cozumel and Cancun. These storms that go due west through the Caribbean, hit that area down towards Belize, every hurricane season. This storm will be no different. This will not move northwards. So anywhere in the Gulf Coast, even Texas, you are safe, you are fine from this storm. But Cancun, Cozumel, and then eventually towards Tampico, those are the areas that have to deal with Grace. The other storm, of course, is Fred. It's a big rainmaker right now. We have seen a couple tornadoes in areas of South Carolina. We do have that tornado threat in North Carolina also. And the heavy rain threat in the mountainous areas could be a problem today and tonight, even into tomorrow afternoon. About 18 million people under flash flood watches from north of Atlanta all the way now up into the southern tier of New York around Binghamton. And we can expect possibly 1 to 3 inches for a large area, even including New York City and the southern New England. But it's the mountainous areas that could see those higher totals. So we're wrapping up today, and we don't want to forget our friends in the northern plains with another record-breaking heat wave. And out in the west, those fires are still burning, and we have hot, dry, windy conditions coming to the west in the days ahead. I'm sure we'll be talking about that as we head towards the weekend. Back to you.
Get ready for a third COVID shot. The Biden administration close to recommending fully vaccinated Americans get a booster shot 8 months after their second dose. Here now, Dr. Richard Besser, former acting director of the CDC. He is also the president and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, started by one of the founders of Johnson & Johnson. Dr. Besser, the FDA authorized booster shots for the immunocompromised last week, but they've repeatedly said the general public didn't need one just yet. So what's changing here?
Yeah, Allison, these are different populations. So the issue with people who are immunocompromised is that 2 doses never gave them the same level of protection that other people received. What the CDC has been doing is been looking to see whether the full dose of vaccine in people who are not immunocompromised, whether the protection levels, which were so high, started to drop off over time. And they've been monitoring for that. And what we understand is that tomorrow they're going to share data that indicates that after 8 months or after some period of time, the level of protection starts to drop off. That was the signal they were watching for to determine when and if people might need booster shots.
Dr. Besser, we're looking at maybe mid to late September for those boosters to start, but we're seeing record-breaking hospitalizations right now around the country. 5 states hit new peaks in their 7-day averages over the weekend. Most of the cases we're seeing, as we've been saying over and over again, are among the unvaccinated. Are you concerned that launching a booster shot campaign might distract from the push to get those all-important first vaccinations, or that it could even discourage people who are skeptical that the COVID shot actually works?
Well, you know, hopefully it won't discourage people, because these are some of the most effective vaccines we have for any disease. 2 doses providing over 90% protection from severe disease, hospitalization, or death. You know, one of the things, though, Allison, that I think it is important to talk about is that the most important thing that can happen to get this pandemic under control is for people to get their first series of doses. And for so many people in this country, they made a decision not to. I encourage them to reconsider that decision. The other piece of this is that while there is abundant vaccine available in the United States, the majority of the world, that's not the case. In so many countries, either the percentage of coverage is at 0 or 1%. And we have to look carefully at what we can do as a nation to provide more vaccine to the global community, because spread of this virus anywhere is a risk to people everywhere. That's how variants spring up. But it is also essential that this life-saving intervention is made available to people everywhere, and it isn't hoarded by the wealthiest nations.
Yeah, let's make sure that everybody who wants this shot can have access to it. Let's talk about the booster recommendation, Dr. Besser. It would only apply to the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine. How about the J&J shot?
What they're saying is that they're waiting to see the results of a study that J&J did with a 2-dose series of vaccine before deciding what to do in terms of the recommendation. So both Pfizer and Moderna have sent forward their vaccines for consideration by the FDA for authorization for a 3rd dose. What has to happen before boosters can start is the FDA has to review it and approve its use under emergency use authorization for a 3rd dose. Then that advisory committee to the CDC will look at that and say, okay, here's who we think should get it. Here's what we think the time frame should be. My expectation is that they would recommend it for those who got it earliest, but in particular, those in the highest risk groups. So frontline healthcare workers, other frontline workers, elderly people, people in nursing homes, those who have the greatest risk of dying from COVID.
Dr. Besser, I can't let an esteemed pediatrician such as yourself go without talking to you about kids. We have been talking so much about all of parents' concerns, as so many of them are sending their kids under 12 back to school. We know that they're not eligible for vaccines just yet. Any updates on the timeline for getting those kids vaccinated, and just any new advice you might share with parents who are really just struggling right now, trying to protect their kids, keep them safe, but also aware that they so desperately need to get back to school, to be with their friends, and to get a real in-person education?
Yeah, you know, this is really challenging. There are no updates in terms of the timeline for FDA. Hopefully, they'll make a decision soon in terms of the use of vaccines in younger children. But what we saw over the past year is that you can get children to school safely if you have measures in place. And it's so important that those measures are in place and that we follow them, regardless of what your particular governor may say. So that means ensuring that in school, that desks are separated, ensuring that teachers and staff are vaccinated, ensuring that ventilation has improved, and also sending your kid to school with a mask. It's an easy thing to do that will help protect your child and as well as those around them. Kids belong in school learning, and we can do it safely.
All right, let's hope we are able to do that through the fall. I know so many parents and kids are eager to get back to school, to some sense of normal life, but also want to keep them safe. Dr. Besser, it is always such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Allison.
Immunocompromised folks in Detroit driving up to get their third COVID shot. NBC News correspondent Chef Brewster shows us how it's going.
Hi there, Allison. Well, third time's the charm. That's how one person put it to me as he was getting that third dose, that booster shot of his vaccine, getting that extra layer of protection. This vaccination site, it's a drive-up vaccination clinic. We've been familiar with these scenes before, but the difference is this is now for folks to get the third shot. The requirements that they have in place are pretty simple. You have to be fully vaccinated for at least 6 months with either that Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. You have to say or attest to the idea that you have a compromised immune system. Though I spoke to the health department, and they're not looking to verify that information. Their priority is getting these vaccines out to people as quickly as possible, especially this population who have compromised immune systems and are most at risk with this virus. I want to give you a sense of what it was like being in there as folks were getting this shot. This was the first day they were able to do so. Listen to what they told me.
It's my third time doing it.
Why'd you come in to get that booster shot?
Well, I was just diagnosed with kidney cancer, and it's important to me to be protected. So whenever they was going to offer it, I was going to be here.
I know that this virus and this pandemic is just so deadly, and this is extra protection that we need, everyone needs. So yeah, I have a 92-year-old mother and a sister that's mentally impaired, Down syndrome. So anything I could do in order to protect them from getting the virus.
And Allison, I'll tell you, as I was in there watching people get vaccinated on the first day that it was available for them to get this third dose, it wasn't lost on me the idea that here in Detroit, only about 42% of the population have even started their vaccination process, let alone being fully vaccinated. So while you have people rushing to get their third dose, you have local officials emphasizing and pleading with people to get their initial dose, get one of those first 2 shots of this vaccine protection. As the mayor said, he is concerned that the surge that we're seeing in the South that has not made its way here to Michigan or here to Detroit just yet. He's concerned that July that you saw in Florida will turn into a bad November here in Michigan. So you have officials emphasizing their priority is on getting people that initial vaccination protection. But for those who need that additional booster shot, they now have that option as well.
It is time for the bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. Disappointing July retail sales out today. They fell more than 1% last month. Shoppers spending less on cars, clothes, and sporting goods, but they're buying more gas and going out to eat and drink more. The market's rattled by the numbers today. The Dow losing 282 points, concerned that the Delta variant is slowing down the economy. Free college tuition, even retirement benefits. U.S. businesses offering some big perks to attract new talent with job openings topping 10 million this summer for the first time ever. CNBC senior personal finance correspondent Sharon Epperson is joining us now with more on these very impressive incentives. So, Sharon, we have heard the stories about the labor shortages, right? Just go out to eat and you'll see it. Restaurants haven't been able to hire seasonal workers and staff up this summer. We've got schools that can't find enough teachers. So tell us more about the perks. What are businesses doing to encourage employees to sign on the dotted line?
Well, you know, as you're looking at jobs, you need to look at perks, because that is what job seekers are doing right now. They are actually looking specifically for perks. They want, number one, more money. Not just a higher wage, but are you going to give me a signing bonus if I come to your company? And many companies are offering that. Some companies are offering retention bonuses for you to stay with the company. Walmart's doing that with warehouse workers, and Papa John's and Chipotle are offering referral bonuses to some employees. So that one-time cash payment can be the incentive that draws a lot of people in. Another form of money is paying for my college tuition. If you're going to pay for me to advance my career, but advance my education at the same time, that is something that a lot of people want. And Target and Walmart are offering 100% tuition, college for undergraduate studies. And then there's this student loan reimbursement. Many companies, before the pandemic, there were about 8% of major companies that were offering student loan repayment. That is now $5,250 a year that your employer can put toward paying down your student loan debt, and they can do that for the next 5 years. This is money that you can get, and you don't even have to pay taxes on it.
Sharon, it all sounds pretty darn good to me. I mean, if those aren't incentives enough to get people back to work, these are simply folks, I think, who don't want to go back to work. But let's talk about work situations. I know so many employees want to keep their work situation flexible post-pandemic, right? They may have been working from home. It's made it a little easier to manage their family lives, other things. How does working from home factor into a job offer these days?
You know, you can get used to this, right? A lot of workers are seeing that. In fact, a Flex Job survey found that 30% of workers after the pandemic want to work hybrid and 65% want to work remote full time. So companies are going to have to step up and figure out how to allow their employees to have more flexibility. And one of the ways they're doing it is to help them with their home office, give them a couple $100 to actually buy the equipment that they need to make sure that they're able to do what they need to do from home. So flexibility, in addition to, of course, getting that one-time cash payment, those are probably the two biggest things that employees want right now and that job seekers are looking for. They're going to Indeed.com and putting that in. Not just the industry, not just the company, but also do you offer bonuses? And are you flexible in terms of the work commitment and the work time and where you have to work?
Hey, Sharon, I'm right with those hybrid folks, right? It's kind of nice to be able to work from home. We never had that flexibility in news, but man, do I miss seeing other people sometimes. It's definitely good to be around coworkers and colleagues and out of the studio basement.
Absolutely.
I have to ask you, though, we're seeing really right? The best of both worlds, I think. I have to ask you about the differences that we're seeing, though. We're seeing some big differences in who's adding employees and who's losing them. Just for example, leisure and hospitality added 380,000 new workers in July. Retail lost more than 5,000. So why are some sectors really attracting more talent while others are still struggling to bring people back to work?
You have to think of supply and demand, Allison. You know, keep in mind that in July, as people were feeling more comfortable before a lot of the news about the Delta variant, they wanted to go out. They may have already booked vacations. They may have already been planning to see friends and more comfortable going out for dinner, out to for drinks. In terms of retail, again, the back to school hadn't necessarily really started yet. And so maybe there wasn't that same kind of demand. But also keep in mind what employers are doing, recognizing that maybe my industry is not the one that people want to go into right now. Target and Walmart, you know, what they've done in terms of the 100% for college tuition is definitely an incentive that a lot of folks want. And maybe if they are feeling like people are shying away from retail right now, this is a reason to draw them in.
Sharon, it is so fascinating what is going on with jobs in our labor market right now. We always love having you on. I'm sure you'll have more on this in the days and weeks to come.
Absolutely.
As employers just try to get people back to work. It's such a tough battle.
It's a battle, but employers are really trying to figure it out, and employees have the upper hand at this point. What they're saying they want, that's what employers are trying to offer.
All right, there it is. Sharon Epperson, always great to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Big water cuts coming to parts of the Southwest. U.S. officials are declaring the first ever Tier 1 water shortage on Lake Mead. It's the nation's largest reservoir, part of the Colorado River Basin, which supplies water to 40 million Americans, 7 states and 2 countries. NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman's at Lake Mead in Boulder City, Nevada, talking to farmers who could suffer the most.
Allison, here in the Mojave Desert, water is everything, but the water is drying up, and you don't have to look far to see what's happening. Everywhere that I'm standing right now, this beach, this all used to be underwater. It was part of Lake Mead until just about 20 years ago or less, and this white ring that you see here, they call it the bathtub rings, that's the old water line. But over the last 2 decades, the water levels here have fallen 130 feet. And in May, they passed a critical threshold, falling below 1,075 feet, which was the agreed upon level from the states that rely on this water to start making some drastic cuts. There are 40 million people who rely on the water from the Colorado River Basin as well as Lake Mead. And with this new water shortage declaration, there's going to be cuts starting at the beginning of next year. It'll mostly affect agriculture at first because of the way this is tiered to try to protect some of these cities. But I spoke to the head of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, who told me that while they've been planning this for a long time, it doesn't mean they're out of the woods.
I think what's incumbent upon the entire region is that we have a plan for that worst case scenario. Right now, we've planned for the very bad. We have not planned for the absolute worst.
The bulk of those cuts you're going to see are going to be in Arizona, where they are set to lose about 8% of their state's total water supply when those effects kick in early next year. The ones who will get hit first are farmers who are going to need that water for agriculture. And we spoke to some farmers at a local farmers market about what they are thinking about this new water shortage. Here's what they had to say. Do you worry the water supply here in Las Vegas could be next?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I worry about it all the time.
My concerns about the future are how are we going to manage that? Like, I know here in Nevada, it's just dry. We haven't really gotten the rain. There's just so much agriculture that, especially up north in Nevada, they have a lot of agriculture. So I'm sure that's going to affect them. It's going to affect us down here in northern Nevada. And are they going to tell us you can only use this much water to do your farming, or are they going to let us continue to just use it and pay the higher price for water?
Already in Arizona, farmers are scrambling to find other sources of water, looking to see whether they can tap into groundwater instead. But they face a tough choice of possibly having to leave some of their fields barren when these water cuts take effect. And the big concern here, Allison, if this drought continues as it is predicted to, and the water levels fall even farther, that would trigger a level 2 and then a level 3 water shortage. That could mean water cuts that could affect residences and businesses, including in major cities like Phoenix, Tucson, and Las Vegas.
Tennis star Naomi Osaka leaving a press conference in tears, her agent calling a reporter there a bully. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin has the story.
Hey, Allison. Naomi Osaka took questions from reporters ahead of this weekend's tournament in Ohio. She was asked about her mental health as well as what reporters can do better, but one exchange brought her to tears.
A young tennis star wiping away tears. Naomi Osaka overcome with emotion after interacting with a reporter.
You're not crazy about dealing with us, especially in this format. Yet you have a lot of outside interests that are served by having a media platform. I guess my question is, how do you balance the two?
When you say I'm not crazy about dealing with you guys, what does that refer to?
It started when a reporter from the Cincinnati Enquirer referred to past comments Osaka had made about her issue with the format of press conferences. The moderator offering to move on when Osaka paused mid-answer.
No, I'm actually very interested in that, point of view. So if you could repeat that, that'd be awesome.
The 23-year-old went on to finish the exchange.
Ever since I was younger, I've had a lot of media interest on me.
But seconds later, she started to cry and left the room. After a short time, Osaka returned to finish taking questions. Naomi's agent later calling the reporter a bully, adding his sole purpose was to intimidate. Overnight, the reporter, Paul Doherty, writing in a column that he understands Osaka's struggle, adding she's very human and doesn't mind showing it. Monday's press conference was Osaka's first since she stunned the world in May, refusing to speak to the media at the French Open before quitting the tournament and later withdrawing from Wimbledon. Osaka revealing on social media she has suffered long bouts of depression and that she gets huge waves of anxiety before speaking to the press. Osaka says her mental health struggles started in 2018 after she upset Serena Williams to win the U.S. Open, a bittersweet victory she spoke about on Today.
I felt a little bit sad because I wasn't really sure if they were booing at me or if it wasn't the outcome that they wanted.
Sparking a conversation about athletes and mental health that continued at the Olympics, where after issues early in competition, Simone Biles opened up about the struggles many face.
At the end of the day, we're not just athletes or entertainment, we're human too.
During that press conference, Osaka also made suggestions as to how the press conference format could be improved. She took issue with the timing of the press conferences, saying they often take place after losses, ask sensitive questions, which amplifies, she says, her feelings of loss. She also says that athletes should be allowed the option to take sick days following those matches instead of paying fines for missing out on those press conferences. She said it would make the whole thing a much friendlier experience.